Hey everybody. This is going to be a fun one today. This happened because of Twitter. I saw a report from Matt Andrew, and then my buddy Matt Baehr chimed in on it, and I thought, oh, these guys have both done similar research, maybe different questions, probably definitely different coaches. And I thought, oh, this will be fun to see, to compare the data, compare the information. This is probably going to be the most updated information on what college coaches are thinking, how they're recruiting, where they're getting their players from, etc. We were just joking off the air, guys. We've got Matt 1 and Matt 2. And I was joking, it made me think of Dr. Seuss thing 1 and thing 2. We've got Matt Andrew. And I'm guessing you're in the UK, Matt?
I am, yes. Yeah, just in around the Manchester area, so northern England.
Okay, all right. Where it's always nice and sunny and warm and yeah, make you jealous of me
Very,
being out in California, although we've got a rainy day out here, so what the heck?
yeah, I'm sure you guys aren't looking at grey skies like we do for, I'd say, between 360 to 361 days of the year, but
Yeah, no, we
there we
aren't.
go.
No, we aren't. And then we've got Matt Baehr. So we've agreed we're just going to refer to you as Baehr today. And Matt does this really cool deal on X called Discover College Soccer, and he does podcasts and he's interviewed I don't know how many coaches, Matt.
Well, I was looking that up today, and I think the episode that'll drop today might be number 350 in terms of different coaches. I've done more than I'm almost to 400 total podcasts because I've talked to folks like you and VO and Replayer and folks outside. But in terms of coaches, it's I think I'm hitting 350 today.
Wild. That's
Yeah.
great. And then you both have done some data, so we'll talk about that. So, Matt, Andrew, how you're in the UK? Why are you doing this? Why are you talking about college soccer? What's your deal?
I mean, I guess kind of just to go back, so my kind of academic background is in skill acquisition, talent identification, and development. Started looking at kind of to help coaches. I was always really interested in understanding how people learn, particularly from a sporting perspective, and then how we could kind of help that. So my background is sort of talent development, and then it shifted to talent ID, looking at how we can use that to identify future talent. And I started looking from a purely from a female soccer perspective here in the UK, because I have two daughters who play soccer. One son pending, but I've got two daughters who love soccer, and they turned around to me one day and said, "Why do you not research uh, girls' soccer, women's soccer?" So it's a really good point. So I started looking into it from a UK perspective, and it naturally led me to having conversations with, at the time, the director of the female national teams for talent ID for female national teams, which was Morel from Rybok. And we kind of tried back and forth. This was maybe 2021, around some data, some ideas around talent ID. And the more and more that I started researching, well, the lack of research in this area, it naturally led me to college. And the reason for that is that it's very distinct from what we're typically used to here in Europe. And it kind of has a very kind of non-linear pathway. And it really strikes me as interesting because from our perspective, at the age of 17, 18, whether it be males or if they're typically going into what you would classify as like a senior or a first team environment where they're open age, they could be playing against, 25 to 30-year-old men and women. Whereas here, for you guys in the US, I know it's changing. I do understand that the landscape is changing very, very rapidly. But kind of from a female perspective and naturally from the male perspective, in the US, the natural step is college. And then there's almost like, I don't want to say a holding pattern, but you got like 4 years and then stepping into that senior environment. So there was a lot of emphasis placed on that. I visited the US, I've been over to say 5, 6 times since sort of 2022, and went to national team events, going to club competitions like the ECNLs, Girls Academy, things like that, and obviously seeing the college scouts, the events. And so I kind of started exploring in that area. And so, yeah, that's what really led me to this. And this is the first real, a lot of my research from a US perspective has been sort of national team level, whereas this was kind of the first one into college. And what I realized was that, from a talent ID and development, there's no research at all. There's been like 6 studies in soccer. Pretty much all of them have been looking at the relative age effects. That's really it. So I really want to kind of delve into that. And this was a natural starting point to say, okay, what do college coaches actually define as talent and what do they really look for? So that's where I started. And hopefully this is the first step into maybe a bit more research in this area.
And what's your day gig?
So I'm a senior lecturer, which is like the equivalent in the US is like an associate professor at a university. So I'm based at the Manchester Metropolitan University, the Institute of Sport. So we're here in the northwest of England. So we're a university, and we specialize in sports, undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. So I teach predominantly on the sport and exercise science undergraduate degree. So I teach, the umbrella would be sport and exercise psychology, but my area is really skill acquisition and talent identification development.
Fantastic. Well, this makes sense then. Why you'd get into this? All right, don't make me feel too dumb. I'm just a soccer coach, so yeah, go easy on me, brother. So Baehr, so tell everybody about your how you got started in this. Like, why are you doing this 400 plus episode and ongoing and so involved in college soccer? Where'd this come from?
Well, so I mean, I played Division III soccer many years ago, and I loved it. It was the best choice for me. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I did a MBA slash Masters in Sports Administration program, and coming out of that, I coached a D2 men's program for a few seasons. So I had been a college coach, and left that for a non-sports job, but then I ended up becoming executive director for the Arlington Soccer Association in Virginia. So it was like, okay, a business job, but a soccer job. And then I left that, went back into business. Then I went to IMG, where I was the program manager for soccer. And obviously there helped with some college stuff. I ran the tournaments there, and so it was my job to bring in the college coaches to get them to recruit the players at the tournaments and things of that nature. And then left that, went back into the business world. But I've been helping out our club here in Bradenton for a while. And my daughter was getting into the high school age, and I'm sitting here going, okay, there's some girls on her team and I know can play in college, but they're probably a perfect Division III fit. Only problem is there's not a single Division III school in the state of Florida, which is one of those
Right,
fun facts that most people don't know.
right.
Um, and so I'm like, well, how, we're playing in a state league. Uh, how are these girls going to even know these schools exist? And then I was remembering back to when I was coaching at Oakland City. We were in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, in a little coal mining town, and I was begging people to come play for me because they didn't know
Right.
the school existed. Now that was so long ago that it was before social media and any of that stuff. But and so I'm like, how can I help these kids who need to learn about schools that they have no idea that they exist, and B, help these schools that would love to get in front of kids that don't know they exist. And I'm like, well, maybe a podcast is the best way to do that. And I still had enough friends in the business to say, hey, I'll call up a few folks and see if they'll come on with me just to talk about, you know, their school, how they recruit, and that sort of thing. And it just kind of became, well, you know, as you know, because we've met via social media, there's a lot of crap that gets thrown around on all the various social media platforms about how coaches actually recruit, how the process actually works. So I'm like, well, if I just talk to the coaches, there's how it works. So now
Right.
we're like I said, we're 350 in. I think I have a pretty good idea of what happens in the college recruiting process now. And so it's been fantastic. I've made a lot of new friends, but better friends. And in the process, my daughter's gone from, I think we started this, maybe she was in eighth grade. She's a senior now and just committed last month. So we it's been a kind of personal journey for me as well. But the beauty of it is the whole reason I said I had started this originally to bring it full circle was I thought there were a couple girls that would probably fit very well at a Division III institution on my daughter's team, and we've got
Right.
two girls who are committed to a Division III institution in North Carolina, and it's just it's satisfying to know that okay, I wasn't wrong about that. My talent identification was on point, as Matt would be proud, but to see that actually helped. So I've just been continuing to do the podcast, to meet new coaches, get new programs out there, and then to dovetail that into the research that we're talking about. Um, I just said, well, my wife by trade is a market researcher, so she's always showing me surveys and studies and things that she's done. So I was like, yeah, that'd be great if I just let's get some numbers behind it. Yes, I've talked to 350 coaches, but that's all kind of anecdotal material. Let's get some actual hard quantitative data around these things. So I did a full survey in 23 and in 24. Unfortunately, I didn't do it this summer, but I've got 2 years of comparative data that folks can see up on the discovercollegesoccer.com website.
That's just brilliant. Yeah, I met you guys both on X, and ironically, right now I'm suspended on X. They think I'm a bot or something. They suspended me for inauthentic behavior. I don't even know what that means, but when you read the description, they think I'm a bot or that I was spamming or something. So Twitter and its algorithm. So if somebody's listening to this, by the way, out there and knows somebody that works at X, dang, I've submitted 3 appeals and I miss X. It's my diary. It's my journal. I tell people what is happening in my day in the world of college soccer on X mostly. If you look at everything that I post, and yeah, I just post as a college coach. Honestly, the job that I do at SRUSA, I just think like a college coach because I can't help it. I coached in college for 22 years. And so I just think like a college coach. So I love how all of this dovetails this conversation, and I want to get straight into it. So, um, Matt, let's talk about the some of the data that you've discovered. What's the first like significant thing that stood out to you? Is there something in your data you go, wow, that's glaring. That is really standing out to me from the study that you did.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I guess some of it might be kind of stating the obvious to you guys. As you said, obviously, I'm on the other side of a huge ocean, so I was kind of looking at it from afar. So some of this, I guess, could be kind of well, it makes absolute sense, and you
Don't
guys have got
apologize,
experience.
Matt. You'd be surprised what Americans don't know about college soccer. Just go on X and spend some
Yeah,
time there, and you would be dumbfounded. It's like I am jaw dropped that American parents are so, I guess the word's ignorant. I mean, they just don't know about what the real world of college soccer, their perceptions. And by the way, the game's changed so rapidly. It's changed faster in the past 3 years than it has in the past 30.
yeah,
It's insane how fast it's changed. So yeah, don't apologize for anything you say. I guarantee you, we got American parents and players that will have no clue when
yeah.
you point something out. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, no, it's a good point, and I guess from my side, it was kind of I gave a talk. I gave a talk 2 years ago in the UK around soccer in the US, and some of the kind of things that are common for you guys. It just completely took everybody by surprise. So the emphasis placed on college, we don't have that here. So what we have is we do have athletes, and we do have, so I've got to say, like, for example, from a female perspective, we had our Lionesses win the European Championships, and a couple of those players are current students at university, but also have been students at a university college. But the way they have it is they are full-time professional athletes and they attend university. And so, but it's not common for us. That's one or two people, whereas obviously it's relatively a common pathway for players in the United States. So that was a huge shock. The pay to play model is very, very different here, in terms of coaches, very much on a volunteer basis. And then just obviously like the sheer demographics of the United States. So you can fit the entire of the UK landmass inside the state of Wyoming. We're tiny. We're 40 times smaller than the US and like 4 times the population size. So, that's from a UK, but it's very, very different. So that was a shock. So, but for me, kind of the things were just to get an understanding of the soccer landscape. So we have a few research articles that one will be out, I'd say within the next couple of weeks, that is with colleagues from US Soccer, where we have interviewed national team scouts around the landscape and how it impacts talent ID. So the college system comes up. But then also we've wrote a commentary piece just on the pathways. It's been done previously in the Mail from one of my colleagues, but we did it on a female perspective, just to really give an idea of the landscape, because I think you're right, it's not commonly known. And we didn't actually, when I wrote, I didn't think about actually people within the United States. I was thinking more globally, because they're not aware of what goes on. But actually what you're saying there is, it'd be interesting from people within inside the US, how they'd see it. So, I mean, kind of the things that shocked me mainly, I did expect it, but not on the scale, was the value that they place upon what we call like game intelligence. So what you would call like decision-making, anticipation, they're seen as really important factors. And they are, once you get to a certain age, the physical factors don't really discriminate players who go and progress either to go on to college or players who progress to be on a professional. One of the key things that really does differentiate players is their ability to scan the environment, extract the relevant information, and then consequently make appropriate anticipatory or decision-making actions. But that was valued, but it's actually really difficult to measure that in a game scenario. And what was really interesting, so we're quite lucky in that we can bring players in and we can test them. Whereas for college coaches and college, you guys are on the outside and watching competitive games because you're not allowed to approach these players, right? So you've got to see them in a game, which is great, but actually a lot of this goes on. You watch 22 boys, girls, men, women on a soccer field, but it's very difficult not to follow the ball. And actually kind of some of these key actions occur 5 to 10 seconds earlier. And so, you see a key pass, for example, being made by, like a number 10 or a number 8. But they've made that decision 5 seconds ago when it may have been like with a left or right fullback, and they're turning, they're scanning the environment. But because you're watching 22 players and maybe you're focusing on maybe 3, it's very difficult to follow one player all the time. So I found that quite fascinating, that it's really valuable by the coaches, but actually, it's incredibly hard for them to see these kind of actions. And I guess that replicates as well for psychological skills. So some of the key ones that were kind of really were pulled up were work rate, coachability, confidence. These are all like, one of the main ones from the boys' side was like, and we see this in the literature, is like grit, determination, resilience. It's really hard to see that again on a pitch. There is no gold standard. Even for us as sports scientists and researchers, there is no let's take this survey and this survey, let's give it to a player and we'll understand whether they've got the right psychological skills to progress. There is no magic key at the moment for that, yet coaches really value this. So it just kind of, it just shows me that they really value it, but it's really hard to see. So, I mean, I guess it circles back to your original point, like, why did we do this? What I want to do is provide coaches, scouts, anyone working in soccer in the US and worldwide, but if we're focusing on the US, provide them with some real world scientific evidence that, and information that they can take, and it will help them develop talent identification development, whether it be in the boys, girls, or college and beyond. So I just wanted to give some real kind of evidence-informed information that people can use, right? So it's just to really spread that message. So yeah, it's interesting. So those kind of things really stuck out within this survey. And as I said, it's just it was open to college coaches, and just to see what they thought. And it's kind of like a first step. And I guess with this, my thing is, I'd love to hear from more people. I'd love to hear from all 350 coaches and get their insights into this, because I'd love to know what they'd like to see from the literature, because kind of, as I said, some of it is obvious, but it's just a first step. It's building that foundation of research and that landscape that I've been trying to do over the last couple of years and build upon that. So we're having a real world impact. But I guess my call is for coaches maybe to approach me, and look, I'm happy to be emailed. Twitter, X, LinkedIn is kind of the common things that we use for people to approach me and say, this is where I think the research should go, and this is what I'd like to find out. Because that's, by doing that, we can then kind of tackle these problems with science and help, and then provide that information back. That's my aim.
No, you're right. I mean, from the, technical, tactical, physical, and mental, the four pillars of a player, the technical is very easy to see. I mean, you can see who can play and who can't. You can see the faster players, the bigger players, the stronger players. On the physical side, it's the mental and tactical pieces. And you're not wrong when, when I'm out scouting a game, coaches don't scout games in general, just sitting down at a game with, 30 players that are going to come in and out and go, okay, who's the better player here? Generally, that's not how it's done. Generally, a player has caught their attention through a referral, through somebody who's pointed that player their direction, or word on the street, or that player contacted them, and Matt, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit with you. I think your research was a little different, like how do coaches find players was part of it and all of that. So, but when they sit down, they're focusing on that player. And if it's a center back that I'm recruiting, looking at, I'm focusing on that center back. And even when the ball's at the other end of the pitch, it's like, where does that center back position themselves when they're off the ball? Are they organizing play? Are they closing the spaces properly? Are they looking left and right and getting their outside backs to shift with them and hold their spaces properly? Are they checking their shoulder, making sure the goalkeeper is closing into spaces? That center back is, constantly organizing and moving things around, even when they're off the ball. So I might miss actions that happen on the attacking end of the pitch easily. So unless a striker comes up with, 3 bicycle kicks and 2 diving headers, and everybody's going, "Who's this kid?" Or I'm gonna miss the actions of the strikers on that team, maybe, or the outside, the wingers, the 7, the 11. I'm gonna miss some of those actions. So you're right. I think it's impossible for any coach to look at, 22 players on the pitch at the same time and be evaluating everybody. And it's always, it makes me sad on one side, but it just shows you how it is that players on the top ECNL or GA or MLS Next teams in the country don't get recruited, don't even get evaluated.
Yeah, it's true.
And that happens.
I guess I probably should highlight, for anyone who's listening and obviously hasn't read the paper that I published, but what we didn't do was we didn't look at it by position. And And the reason for that was that you'll see that the list of skills and attributes is quite comprehensive because we wanted to give a really good account and be
Yes.
kind of specific.
Yeah.
So, okay, of course, technical skills are important, but specifically which technical skills. And it took between sort of 10, 15 minutes for coaches to complete the entire survey.
Right.
And we were quite conscious that even if we just did outfield players and we did, defenders, midfield, attack,
They'd be there
let's
for an
say.
hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And
They
college,
won't do it. Right.
no. And so, I was really fortunate. So I sent my survey out to every single head coach, associate coach, assistant coach, pretty much anyone who had an email on the college website. I sent the email to them, and I had 178 respond back. So, I could imagine if I asked them, and I said like 10, 15 minutes, if I'd have said it's 45 minutes to an hour, I'd be looking
You'll
at
get
about 20.
one guy who's
Yeah,
studying it right now for his master's degree is going to respond back. Yeah,
pretty
no, I
much.
get
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
get it. So Baehr, that kind of dovetails into your research a little bit, and we'll go back and forth here, guys, because it's clear. I probably should have broken this podcast up into each of you because it's clear to me that your studies are in different areas, but they do dovetail together, and that's why it's funny because both of you responded to each other. I'd love to see your study. I want to see
Yeah,
your
yeah.
study.
Yeah.
And maybe we get you two together and we can do combine it all together and organize it in some way so that it's one joint study. That would be amazing. But Baehr, what did you primarily focus on in your study?
Yeah, and I won't pretend to be scientific in any way, shape, or form. Matt's got me on that for sure. Mine was really just to try to put numbers to some of the questions that I get all the time from people via social media or that I'm helping at our club or anything else like that. Like, you know, we people think that just, full ride athletic scholarships are just floating out there for anybody to get. So I was asking questions like, are you fully funded? How many staff do you have? How many kids would be in your database for a single recruiting class? Just things of that nature to really, and this was before the new roster limit rules on
I was
D1,
gonna say some of those questions
which
are
is
loaded
another,
straight at.
which was
Now,
the,
didn't
which
it
was,
used to be pretty straightforward, man? It was 8 kids per recruiting class, just about,
eh,
ish.
right.
Uh, some years
But
9, some years 12, some years 6, but generally it was about 8. But my Lord, has the transfer portal changed that, and the new rules have changed that. Yeah.
which was kind of another reason I didn't end up doing the survey this summer was because I would have had to alter it, I think, a decent bit just based on the new rules. But the other focus was I was looking at all divisions, across men's and women's, and and I did ask something similar to what Matt was just talking about in terms of the soccer IQ. Like, what are some of the most important attributes that they look at in recruiting? And so I made them rank 1 to 10 different attributes, and the biggest thing that was most important across, I guess it was 107 responses, was attitude and culture fit. And I hear that on the podcast more and more and more. It's one bad apple spoils the bunch in a 4-year soccer program, and then that can send kids to the portal, that can just ruin a season, etc. So they are very much focused on that first, which I think is definitely notable. Now, coming in, at second is that technical ability, um, athleticism, and then academics, as it kind of rounds out the fourth spot. And then number 5 is that soccer IQ. Well, I'm sorry. 6 was soccer IQ. 5 was work rate. Now, I have a feeling that that's skewed by division there, because you'll get maybe junior college, Division 3 NAI that if I know if I can get 11 kids that'll just outwork anybody, we're going to win a decent number of games.
Right.
Um, but but those are things, and like you said, that physical size and speed came in lower anymore. Everybody used to think, there were a lot of people, oh, well, you just recruit, 6'2" center backs. Well, I don't think that's the case, but if I have a choice between a 6'2" center back and a 5'2" center back, I'm probably going, and they're equal in all other aspects.
That's
I'm probably
exactly what I've always said, Matt. I always think it's the dumbest argument because, like, okay, you pick a neophyte off the street who's never coached soccer a day in their life and only seen 3 games and go, I have two equal players. One's 6'2", one's 5'2". Which one are you playing? And that would go for basketball or baseball or American football or soccer or rugby or any sport that you can think of if all things are equal. If, and that's the
eh,
key, if all
well,
things are equal, and they're very rarely all equal.
true. And this is where I think it'd be interesting, based on what Matt did, is, if you and Matt, you say you went to like an ECNL event or something, right? Like if you go to one of these tournaments and there's 150 teams there, and you watch games from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., the and let's just say you watch every game and you're just looking at right backs every game. The the ability, the technical ability, soccer IQ, the soccer component of it, my guess is it's like plus or minus 5% on most of these kids. Very rarely are you going to say, "Oh my God, that is by far the single best player. That is by far the single worst player I watched all day." Right? Like it's a very tight bell curve around most of these kids, in my opinion. Now, at an event like that, now sure, if you have a, fourth tier league game against an ECNL game and it's going to be 50-0, like that's different. But when you're talking about the top levels of youth soccer in America, that I feel like it is a very, very thin margin of what kid is quote unquote better than another. And that's where all that other stuff comes into play. The attitude, the culture fit, maybe the size, the passion, the work rate, and what pretty much every coach I talk to says, I know you're going to make mistakes. I'm watching what you do after the mistake, which again, hard to quantify, hard to put a scientific measure on, but that that is that attitude component, that culture fit component that really puts one kid, ahead of another in the recruiting process. And or in the case, because it's college and it's academics, if I have two equal players, and even if it's the 6'2", 5'2" is kind of a big difference, right, in height for a center back. But if it was a 5'6" versus a 5'8", you know, and the 5'6" girl is going to get 25% more in academic scholarship money, well, I might take her because it's going to save me the 25% scholarship athletic budget that I can use somewhere else. So there's all these different factors, I think, in recruiting. And again, part of the reason I went through my survey was to just give numbers to some of this stuff, like interesting things around like the portal. Again, this is from 23 and 24, but you know, do you actively recruit, seek out players from the transfer for portal? A third of the coaches said no. I mean, there's a third of coaches out there that just don't do it. Now, that NAI and JUCO who can't access it, maybe that's partly the reason there. But or do you actively recruit, seek out international players? Surprisingly enough, 40% said no. Now again, there's a lot of D3s who they can't compete because of scholarship money with international students, and getting them in with their high academic requirements and things can be difficult to translate. Uh, you know, the schooling you did in the UK or Brazil or wherever can be different. But yeah, and I think the other thing you mentioned earlier on, Don, was communication method. And what we're seeing is, email is king in terms of the way students get in touch with coaches. And and the way I've seen it most likely is you start with email, and then if they give you their phone number to text with, then it just
Right.
becomes text after that. The
Right.
crazy phone calls happen, but they seem to be more rare these days. I tell kids all the time, you want to stick out, call the coach's office line because nobody else is doing it. And the funny thing is, I've now seen a few cases on college websites. Coach doesn't even list a phone number.
No,
So
most, at least at the, especially at the bigger schools, there's no phone number. And if there's a phone number, you'll notice that every coach's phone number is the same
yeah,
because they just have a general soccer line that goes to voicemail.
right.
Yeah. And then they have private numbers past that. Believe me, they have private numbers.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and you see it happen. Starts with email, then it opens up to the texting and whatnot, or social
Right.
media DMs. But like, I think there's way too many people who think they're gonna get recruited because they have a Instagram account with cool clips on it. I just don't. It's a nice to have, but my research, the data, you know, 87% of coaches answered that social media was by far the least preferred communications method, that they're not just sitting there scrolling Instagram trying to
Yeah,
find
that's
their
such a
next best player.
misperception because I think COVID kind of threw everybody into a tizzy. So in 2020 and 2021, we saw this massive bump in the world. So I got into social media really for the first time in my life in 2018 when I started with SRUSA. And I didn't have a social media presence at all. And in 19, all of a sudden in 2020 and 2021, there was this massive growth that I noticed in the world of sports and college soccer. Coaches are social beasts, and coaches want to communicate with other people in the sport that they're crazy about, no matter what the sport is. And everybody flocked to Clubhouse was massive. Some people don't even remember what Clubhouse is now, but it was massive growth. I bet they're sorry they didn't take the $500 billion or whatever was offered to them at the time. But Twitter just grew up like crazy, and of course X now, but it blew up like crazy. And then I was just talking to a college coach the other day who was talking about the drop off that they've noticed over the past year or so on the soccer discussions. We used to have soccer chat groups, and they used to meet every Thursday, and all that stuff kind of died off. And I just said, when all this was blowing up, and I said, "Oh, this is going to get old real fast for college coaches when everybody's tagging them." And I go on, and I see, I recognize these names. These are friends of mine. I see their programs. It's like, oh, well, I know where that kid wants to go. They've tagged 15 coaches in 15 schools, and those are the 15 coaches on their lists. And then they tag me, and maybe they tag you or anybody they think can give them a hand up. And I thought, oh, this is going to get real old really fast. And I can imagine the DMs these guys are getting. And it's like, this won't last. It's unsustainable if this continues to grow at this point for this coaches every year. And people still say on social media, hey, tag everybody, tag everybody. It's like, oh, dude, you're going to turn these coaches off. And then here's the thing, another discussion I had with a friend of mine who's very connected. And he said, the clips kids are showing and tagging coaches on are terrible clips. And there's a book called Dale Carnegie wrote it, called How to Win Friends and Influence People. By the way, folks, if you've ever never read this book, pick it up. It's so relevant to today, even though it was written in the 40s, late 30s, 40s. And he talks about how once a human being says no to something, once they make a decision, it is almost impossible to change that person's mind. So, your name is Don Williams and you're tagging every single coach and your clips are terrible. That coach has decided you're a terrible player. So, no matter what you do, no matter how many emails you send them, good luck changing their mind that you're a terrible player. And even when they look at your clip, even if it's a great clip, they're biased to the fact that you're a terrible player. So I tell people, don't post clips online unless they're brilliant. They better be really, really good because people will make decisions on that. So interesting what you found about that with social media. And I think you're right for kids. The initial outreach is email, and then after that it's text. Text is golden. I mean, honestly, I don't use email reaching out to college coaches very often because I have a bunch of phone numbers in my phone, and I just, do you like this kid? Do you like that kid? If you don't like them, great. If you like them, fantastic. Let me introduce you. That kind of thing. It's just text is king if you can get that number, but you got to get that coach's personal cell number first.
Our research said the same thing in terms of social media clips. So it's we actually asked what's your preferred method, or what do you think is like the best method to scout and recruit players. Social media clips was by far ranked at the bottom. So in terms of, we said, like, how important is it? How much do you value it? And it's pretty much consistent across D1, D2, men's and women's programs. It's just classed as not important, 2 out of 5. And then we also asked them, what do you think is the most important second and third? And out of 178 coaches, one coach on the female side said it was the third most important. That's it. Everything else is just 0. So yeah, it's not seen as value from the coaches that we surveyed.
I think what the kids don't understand is, if you're a college coach and you're on social media, generally it's because that's your personal downtime.
Right.
Yes, I have a Twitter account as Coach Baehr from XYZ University, but when I log into Twitter and I'm scrolling, I'm doing it because I'm looking at other stuff. I'm thinking about things that aren't. I'm not going in there specifically to, okay, I'm going to find my next starting forward. Like, it's just not how it's used.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like, I mean, it's like people tell me, oh, you should advertise, something like for my day job, like on Facebook or something. I'm like, if my buying audience, when they're on Facebook, they're looking at their friends' kids' pictures. They're not looking to buy what I'm selling. So why would the intent isn't there. And I think again, that's why email, I think, is the best method, because you're emailing them. It's in their inbox. They're at their office. They're logging into their email. That's what they're in that mode. Um, and so, yeah, it's, I think it's a no-brainer, but I agree, Donald, especially on the clip side, that the video component these days is just so brutally important. Um, and especially, Matt, from folks from overseas. I mean, there's so many coaches out there who are recruiting international players who have never seen them play in person. It's purely done on video,
Yeah.
and so you got to have good video. You have to be able to stand out against, um, somebody else. And oh, by the way, even the domestic kid in the U.S., you might get recruited in an offer having never been seen play in person. I mean, it happens. It's now, does it happen a lot? Uh, I wouldn't say it's the majority for the domestic player, but it definitely happens.
Well, it depends on budgets, and this is what people
Right.
understand. I ran a college program where I had the men's team and the women's team. Combined budget for scouting and recruiting was $3,000 combined. So one trip to Vegas, one trip to Sacramento, and I have no budget left. That's it. So if it wasn't for video, I wasn't able to put together a team. And by the way, both teams, I got into the national top 20. The men as high as number 2 in the country off of video only. So when coaches say, well, and parents say, and people say, you can't recruit a great team off of top video only. You can't tell top players off of top video only. I said, well, I'm too young to have seen Pele, but when I see video of Pele, he's a really good player. So it's like, of course, I can tell you a good player on video or not. What I can't tell you is when they make a mistake, do they, drop their head and check out for the next 10 minutes? And so now I'm playing my 10 versus their 11 because Bozo over here can't get back into the game because he missed a sitter from 1 yard out and he's out for the next 10 minutes. I don't know if I want to recruit that player or not. I need to decide, can I get through to this kid or not? I need to watch them in multiple games. I need to watch them. Honestly, I've stopped. True story. I'm walking to the field and I'm behind 3 girls that are talking. And one of them has got the trashiest mouth you've ever heard in your life. And it's not only swear words, but she's trashing her parents, she's trashing the coach, she's trashing her teammates. She's just a potty mouth, horrible person. And when I get to the field, it was the girl that had written me that wanted me to recruit her. And it's like, no, I'm not recruiting you. I want you nowhere near my team. Nowhere near that kind of stuff. I can't get on video only. And so those kinds of mistakes are the types of mistakes that I made, players that will ruin your team, players that real, look, all it takes is one player to get to the next two players who aren't getting playing time. And all of a sudden you've got three disgruntled players out of 30. That's 10% of your team. And those 10% will ruin your team. So you guys were spot on with that. And I'm glad that's what it pointed out to us. So that's the kind of stuff I can't get on video. And those are the kinds of mistakes that I really want to avoid. And look, guys, the college coach back in the day, 20 years ago, it didn't matter because the AD had my back. So I could get rid of those kids 3 games. I could go to my AD and go, look, I know we're only 4 games in, but this kid's poison. They'll go get rid of him. Now the AD says, yeah, tough luck, make it work. We don't want any disgruntled parents. And if I have a disgruntled parent or player, I'm the one getting fired. So that's what's changed in the past 20 years is that the ADs now have JDs, now have law degrees. They've never coached a team in their life. And of course, I'm generalizing. And but that's the kind of stuff that's changed.
So Don, just curious if you've heard this similar kind of thing on that specifically. So now with the new NCAA rule changes and roster limits and those kinds of things at the T1 level, because now an athletic scholarship is guaranteed for 4 years, are you seeing or hearing that basically what coaches are doing is they're starting all their incoming freshmen on lower money and then kind of raising it as they go? That way, if the kid happens to say, oh, after a year, you go, hey, you're just not a fit. I don't see you getting on the field. Maybe you want to enter the portal. And if they don't want to enter the portal, they this was my school, so I'm just going to stay here and not be a soccer player. They get to keep that money still, even though they're not on the roster. So coaches are maybe giving out lower money earlier on, and then they say, oh, we definitely want to keep you, so we'll give you a little bit more. We'll give you a little bit more as the years progress. Have you heard anything along those lines or?
Oh yeah, no, and yeah, for sure. Let's clarify, by the way, we're talking D1 only,
Yep.
okay? So D2 it doesn't affect, D3 obviously it doesn't affect. Junior colleges it doesn't affect, NAIA doesn't affect. So 90% of the schools in the country
Right.
aren't affected by this. No, step 2, we're talking about schools that have opted in versus opted out of the NCAA settlement. And then step 3, we're talking about transfer kids also, where yeah, you take a transfer kid, you own that kid for the next 5 years or until they get their degree, whichever comes first. So, um, and yes, that's exactly what's happening. But frankly, it's probably should have been what's happening all along. If I own whatever, if I own ABC conglomerate company, and my top salesman or my top marketing guy is making $250,000 a year, for me to hire a kid straight out of college to come in at that same $250,000 a year, who's unproven, they've never marketed to anything in their life, they just got a degree, I would be an idiot in my company taking that kind of a financial risk. Instead, you bring in somebody at 60 grand a year. If they do well, you bump them to 80. If they do well, you bump them. And if they're a superstar after year 2, year 3, then you're going to get your $250,000 by year 3, year 4. To be honest, Baehr, it's always been that way. I think that on the women's side, it gets a little hinky. And this is why. When you compare the top athletes on the women's side compared to the men's side, as a percentage, there are very few top female athletes. We have female athletes playing Division 1 that runs with their arms like this. When was the last time you saw a man run with their arms out like that, going up and down instead of back and forth, right? Running like a track athlete runs, where their toes and knees and everything kind of flops around. They just don't look very coordinated at the Division 1 level. Point it out to me at the Division 1 men's level. Let me see if that even exists. And if it does, it's an anomaly. It's not a significant percentage that are unathletic, that can't jump, can't run very quickly. And so now we go to other. So I guess what I'm saying is when we see a top female athlete, they really catch our attention as college coaches, and it becomes a bidding war. So we got to throw money at them to get that athlete because it's not going to be easy. There are freshmen in college. There's two that I know of in Texas that are on $100,000 a year revenue sharing / NIL money. Freshmen, unproven, on $100,000 a year. So it does happen more on the women's side, I think, than on the men's side. But in general, Baehr, you're spot on. And I think it really should be this way and always has been this way. It's like, prove yourself first, and then we'll talk about giving you a raise. And we'll talk about how many weeks of vacation you get. And we'll talk about all that stuff after you've proven yourself. But don't walk in demanding money on the job when you've never proven yourself. And coaches are taking that tact more and more. And they're more skittish to give out money. You're spot on. Did you guys talk scholarship money at all, Matt?
No, we didn't. No, it was more around the skills and the attributes, but just with speaking
Right.
to, speaking to college coaches, the times I've been over, those kind of things did factor. And it'd be interesting, as I said, we could only get a snapshot, right? So we could only look at this from the start. And obviously there are bigger contextual issues. I totally get that. Again, like we didn't map this relates to like we didn't look at Division 3 purely just because the amount of surveys we're getting, they were coming back and things like that. It's quite a difficult thing to do. So we just kind of stopped down at Division 2. I wish we'd have gone to Division 3 looking back. But speaking to coaches and getting it is anecdotal, I get that, but just kind of getting their feeling around, this is why we went from Division 1 to Division 2, and we decided, and you can see there's not when you look at our research, there's not a whole lot of differences between the males and the female side of things. It could change when you look at positional differences. There's also not a huge difference between D1 and D2. So players are coaches are looking for a type of player. But the thing I've heard is, obviously you are constrained by things like finances. You're also constrained at like what location, whereabouts is this player, having to relocate. And we did tap into that a little bit, because at the end of our survey, we looked at kind of like, family background, what club did they come from, things like that. And to be honest, it was rated generally low. They were more looking at the player and the person like individually. And as you guys have been saying, like how would they fit in? So we had our survey it's been used before by one of my colleagues, one of my co-authors on the paper, Matthew Reeves. That survey, we simply adapted it because we wanted to compare it across. And we basically, myself and Matt, we just said, well, that's why we had so many skills and attributes. We started quite large, but we wanted to kind of get an idea. But in terms of that social side of things, they were valued relatively high, but then we had a few on. But in terms of like, location was something, but it doesn't factor in when you pull them all together. So I think it is important. It's just something we couldn't capture within our work, but something I'd definitely like to explore. You can see, obviously, you get you get a map and you put where every single club, is for players in the age range that these coaches are looking at, and there is some huge gulfs, right? So it's kind of obvious when you do that there will be differences, but we couldn't really ask those questions. And a lot of it was around, and Matt, I guess your survey could probably tap into this a little bit more, is our survey had to be, it was anonymized. So we couldn't ask those kind of questions because we could fall under the fact we might be able to highlight who they were. Some of them at the end, because so we asked it down at the bottom. We said, like, if you have any comments that would help, please. And there were a few coaches that I recognize even from where I am, when they said, could you let me know the outcome of this? And then they put their name and I could pick out who they were. But apart from that, I had no idea who any of these coaches were. So I couldn't even tell you, I know that they're D1, I know, some of the things, but I didn't know that. But I'd love to know, the budget's kind of is irrelevant, but it's more like, how does that influence the players that you can get? So speaking to coaches on a one-to-one basis, I could get the feel for that. And I do understand that it does play an important part. And one of the big things, and we haven't really discussed it as much, but I guess, I'm happy to, is that one of the key things around for the US and the comparison with Europe is the players are obviously coming in at 17, 18 years of age. They're pretty much adults, but they're coming into an environment where, and you guys were just saying that the aim is to win. Whereas here in Europe, we can bring players in, we can start recruiting players at 9 and bring them in, and they'll come into a club environment, so like a professional environment, and they'll stay there from 9 all the way until whenever if they make a first team senior debut and keep playing for that team. So there's very much an emphasis on development. Whereas in the college, it's very much a winning mentality, because you're coming in to win, you're coming to contribute. And the other thing that's really interesting is, once they leave college and they maybe go on to play there's a disconnect. The colleges are not professional teams in that, they're not going to go to the MLS, the NWSL. So it's kind of like a stopgap. It's a really straight, this is what interested me so much. And so, you need performance ready players. As you were just saying, they're like freshman year, they're unproven, and they're given a chance, but they get a year. Whereas in our environment, they typically come in 9 and there's not a decision made on them until 12, 13, 14, whether they'll keep them in, they'll keep the talent pool as big as they can. So, yeah, I mean, those kind of contextual factors really play an important role in talent identification, development, and scouting, recruiting. But we just couldn't get down to that level. But that's something for me which I'd like to explore. Is, I think I said before, like I'd love to chat to 350 coaches. But one of the things I'd really like to do is expand on some of the work that we've done here and really delve into like positional differences, but then also how much do those factors play a role in whether you'd like to recruit this player. And that might be the player themselves, but then it also might be you as a college, as a program, because if you do have less of a budget, are you going to get that player compared to another program who may be as good, but they have the budget so they can recruit, right? So those kind of things, I'd love to know how much that impacts, and it does for us in different ways, but it's almost like how much of a factor does that play?
Matt, Baehr, did you guys talk about that in your survey at all? So, my observations as a college coach was that most teams are put together from regional players, players that they could see regularly, easily, cheaply. And that's how, and by the way, when you look at most players' wish lists, they tend to be regional teams that they just know the names of, right? They've seen them, they know the names of. They don't want to go that far from home. They'd like it to be driving distance from home. They don't mind moving into a dorm as long as it's 3 hours from home. That kind of thing. Did you guys survey that with college coaches and where they recruit from and how they put their teams together?
So we didn't specifically ask, whether you were local, regional, national in your recruiting. I can tell you, just again, anecdotally based on all my interviews, that you're spot on. I mean, it's predominantly regional. I guess but it also depends on, you know, what region, right? So as Matt said, we're kind of big. There's a lot of miles in the U.S. So, um, and it's tough because if you look at like, I mean, this is a terrible example because it's so dated, but you know, when there was still the development academy on the boys' side, and that was really it on the boys' side. Like there were gaps. Like you say, you could look at a map and you could see this was a talent desert because there wasn't a GA club there. But then all of a sudden, you found the one team that should have been I mean, they would have thumped
Right.
half of the DA schools, but for whatever programs, but for whatever reason, they weren't a program. Now, that that has changed slightly. Now there's this, you know, on the boys' side, it's a fight between ECNL and MLS Next, and on the girls' side, it's GA and ECNL.
Right.
And so you have that dichotomy, but most coaches that you're talking to are are focused on regional because it's about budget. They want to go to the tournaments they can see the best or most players. But then if you are, I would say most Division One schools and your top 50 D2, D3s, they're going to go to the national events because it's the one-stop shop of I know there's going to be 150 teams here and hopefully the clubs have self-selected the best players in that area for me by being the ECNL team or the MLS Next team or whatever it is. So I'm going to go watch that. But it's interesting. I've also talked to coaches who, you know, they're they're going to be like, well, I'm going to zig when everybody else is zagging because if 90% of my conference opponents are all going to this one event because that's where the supposed best players are, I'm going to go to this other event that's lesser known because I'm going to have a better shot at getting some kids that are diamonds in the rough. You know, I think the most commonly used phrase I hear on my podcast is we leave no stone unturned. However, it's that just means they're going to high school games, they're going to local club
Right.
games, local club tournaments, whatever, but you can't get to every
They just
national
don't have the
event.
resources, man. I
There's
mean,
just too
what
we're
was the
too
average staff size that you came up with
Oh,
across all?
let's see here. Sorry, I can scroll to that. It is uh okay, how many of each of these positions does your team have? On average, full-time assistant, point 0.7.
There we go. I was
Like
gonna say it's
not
one and a half. I was
now they
literally gonna
yeah.
say it's one and a half staff members that they have, and that's exactly what it is. It's the
Now
head coach and it's somebody there part time.
they've got part-time or volunteer assistants that you know, but it's hard and we talk about the money, I asked, you know, how much do you have? Like if you consider 100% being fully funded based on
Right.
NCAA or NAI rules, right?
Right.
Uh, and again, this is before the new limits, but
Right.
I mean, it was 56%.
Well, but the
So,
limits doesn't change anything, Matt, because somebody has 28 scholarships that they're allowed to give. They're not giving 28. They don't have that much
well,
money. They're
well,
giving,
so right.
right?
100. Yes, there have been a few schools where we have heard those announcements that they are going up to the 28.
Yes, but those are
It's
the
not
big boys,
many. Right,
girls. Right.
exactly. It's a handful of the
Yeah.
P4s. It's not that many. Um,
Right.
and then I said, okay, what is the percentage of players on the current roster at least on some sort of athletic scholarship? And it was about 70%. And then what is
That's
that average
yeah.
amount? It's about 30, it's about a third.
Right.
So
Right.
and that's what I tell everybody. If a D again, because I have a daughter who's about to go, if you got a roster limit of 28 and the old NCAA rule was 14, that's a half a
Right.
kid, right? I mean, now
Right.
obviously it's going to
Right.
bell
Right.
curve lower and higher, but you're
Right.
on a half. Like it's not.
But your All Americans not on a half.
No,
That's the
no,
problem. That's the
right.
problem, right? So all of a sudden you've got one player on a full and one play and your captain's on three quarters or
Yeah,
90%. And you're at
yeah,
that affects the bottom end, right?
right.
That
So
affects the
that's what we were talking about before, right? So that's where the freshmen are coming in on the lower end,
right.
and then they're hoping to rotate that through. Um, but yeah, it, I and not to get totally off track, but it's you know I've had the conversation because I get the non-soccer people who I'm friends with all the time, like, why aren't we any good? You know, the U.S. men's national, why can't we win? Blah 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 blah.
Oh, stop
And,
laughing, Matt. Just knock it off, okay? You sitting
eh,
there gloating.
well, it's on the
And we
women's
can
side,
only,
No, go ahead. Go ahead,
yeah,
Bear.
I was gonna.
I'm teasing. I'm teasing you, Matt. I'm teasing.
which we're still pretty good there, but on the men's side. But anyway, My answer to my answer always is geography. It goes into Matthew in terms of talent identification. There are so many kids that have talent at a young age that aren't properly nurtured through a development program because we're unable to identify them early because the country's just too damn big, or it's the pay to play winning because for whatever reason an American parent who has not been in the soccer world, we're still probably another 2 generations away from being good. Like I always said, we'd probably get better when my kids were playing, right? Just because my dad didn't know anything about soccer, didn't play, whatever. So you needed at least but maybe it's a couple more generations, and it's because I can't tell you how many parents in this pay to play world that we live in the U.S. are concerned about their U11 team winning a tournament in
Right.
Des Moines, Iowa, and you're like,
Right.
who cares?
Right.
I mean, like, yeah, okay, kids need their confidence built. That's a big part of development. Don't get me wrong, but
Right.
I mean, it's shocking to me the amount that is focused on that whole. Oh, we want to go win this tournament, and you see when teams get put in the wrong brackets and one team is beating everybody in this bracket 10-0, and you're like, well, what's the point? Oh, because you got a trophy? Congratulations. Like this means it doesn't
Right.
mean anything.
Right.
And our focus on development just isn't there. And when you couple that with the geography problem, it's just not going to work. Even when they tried it with the DA, right? I remember because when I was at IMG, we were a DA program, right? And you had the guy who would show up to every game and want the rosters and what formation are you playing, and they wanted everybody in a 4-3-3 because that's what the national team was going to play. And
Right.
and so you'd see the coach write out his 4-3-3, and I mean when the ball rolled out for kickoff, it was obvious they were in a 4-5-1 or a
Right.
4-4-2 or what. They weren't playing it. They just did it because they were told they had to. Because that
Right.
coach, his livelihood depended on that team winning games. Otherwise, his club would find somebody else if they weren't going to win games.
Right.
But the whole point was development. But no, it's
Right.
not. And we get in that predicament. And Matt, I don't know how you asked this in your surveys, but it's the fact that the U.S. is being like the only country that doesn't follow the training compensation solidarity payment program. The the incentive isn't there because we're just not set up
Yeah.
that way, and it's partly because of college soccer, but it's also because of high school soccer and how our clubs are run, not being you know, part of a pro club. And again,
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a unique because at IMG we had a USL2 team, well PDL then, but a USL2 team. I did have that access to like the FIFA transfer, software and all these
Market.
things, and
Right. Hmm.
yeah, we were due some training compensation based on a past player, but basically U.S. Soccer said no, you're not. So it's a weird so that's a whole nother hour podcast in itself.
Yeah, though it's not something we picked up in a survey, but certainly the paper we just published is it's due to come out any day or within the next 2 weeks with a youth national team scouts, and they pretty much echo kind of what you've just said there in terms of size, pay to play, the DA, things like that. So it is something that does crop up, and yeah, just kind of like a lack of like a decentralized system comes up, and so we've got two papers, one next couple of weeks and then one sort of December January time, which is kind of like an overview. It's just from the female side because there's been one already done by one of my colleagues on the men's side, so we just replicate that within the women's because they are very different in terms of those pathways up
Right.
to the pro game. Yeah, it was kind of very very similar in terms of some of the big factors around scouting and talent ID that were discussed. And just one thing to add and to kind of bring in where you talk about the kind of pay to play, but also one of the key things, and I have collected some data on this, not a lot, but some, and compared it to Europe, is the lack of play, like peer-led play, like informal play. So we asked players, and what we found, so I tracked around 30 players that are currently in our, what's the equivalent, like an NWSL level. So they play in the Women's Super League, which is our highest tier here in England. And we asked 30 players, basically, what did they do from sort of when they started playing soccer all the way until they turned sort of 17, 18 years of age, where they played professionally. And what we found, we collected the 30 players who also got to 18, but then didn't make it professionally. They just kind of fell away and played lower standards of soccer, or just stopped playing soccer completely. And one of the key factors that discriminated between making it professional and not was the amount of hours that they spent in informal peer-led play. So you kind of like pick-up games, like informal, like street soccer kind of thing. That was huge. So they were around sort of 2 to 3 times the amount of informal play was from the professionals. And what I saw and what we had, and it's very minimal data, but it's given a clear trend, is that there just isn't that kind of structure. It's all practice, which is great. But actually, and we were talking about this at the start, Dom, when you said to me, the key thing that coaches are looking for is game intelligence, whether they can anticipate, whether they can scan the environment, extract that information, and make the right decision. And informal play is one of the big drivers that will provide you with those skills. So like Don, you talked about Pele, and in Brazil, because I've got a colleague in Brazil they play so much informal play, it's just off the scale.
Right.
And so it develops those technical skills, but because you're in a game situation, you also have to, you're playing maybe like a small sided game, a 3v3 or a 4v4. You have to scan the environment. You have to pick a team out. You have to make a decision on whether, am I going to pass? Am I going to dribble? Actually, am I going to shoot if I'm close enough? And you have to look up. You have to scan. So, but also it's informal. It's with friends. You're having fun. So you'll just keep doing it on and on and on till whenever, So that kind of thing was really important. So those things were coming out from that data. So I just wanted to touch upon that because I felt like it flowed nicely, Matt, from what you were saying there in terms of some of the research that we've been doing.
Well, and to put a bow on it, just anecdotally, personally, my daughter this past March got hurt at a tournament game, and a pretty severe ankle sprain. So it took her a couple months to get back. And, basically coming back the summer before senior year, kind of, we missed some key recruiting time for her. And she, the season was over, and summer's generally a break from club training. But we have an adult pickup twice a week here in town, and she came and played in that, and she's playing against, mostly men. It was, there's a few women out there, but it's mostly men, anywhere from 16 to 60 years old, and she absolutely loved it. And again, she would try things there that she wouldn't do in practice. She would get that confidence, and oh, by the way, you're playing against grown older men. You got to play a little differently. You got to try, and all summer we were doing ID camps and everything. But I swear she, and Don, I think you probably agree. Normally, ID camps aren't about development of a player. Usually they're about
No.
seeing what a player can do. Now, there's a couple of them that have some good development components to them, but I can tell she got better between June 1st to August 1st. And really the only two things she did was playing pickup and going to ID camps. And I'm pretty confident it wasn't the ID camps that
Right.
contributed a
I
lot
hear
to
what you're saying.
that development. So
Yeah, it is. I've been to IMG, Matt, quite a few times. I was there in April actually, but I've been in the actual events that I think it was the GA that I was at
GA Cup, yep.
24. Yeah, that was in March of last year. So yeah, familiar with kind of it's pretty much like all, if you're on the girls' side or you're on the boys' side, you only play. And for the boys, it's a little bit different because there's so many boys here. And I've just got to say this is like, okay, yeah, I will kind of be quite happy with the Lionesses and things like that. Yeah, on the men's side, we can't get past the final hurdle of a final at the moment, but that's another thing. But because here, like boys soccer is huge, so you boys only play boys soccer. For girls, 10, 15 years ago, they had no choice but to play on a boys team or it would be a mixed team. It is a little bit different. So like my eldest is 12 years of age now, or just about to, she plays like 12, the equivalent. And she plays on a girls only team in a girls only league. That doesn't really happen all that much. And I know from working, so some of my research is with a youth, it's just a professional team. It's their youth structure. So, and they're a top tier team, and they will play against boys for the same reason. Because it's faster, the you don't get as much time on the ball. It constrains you more, and that level of challenge. It has changed quite a bit because what you'll now see is that there are less mixed teams here. And as I said, we're not the beacon. We're not. We don't know everything. But I'm just using my example. But from when I've been to and spoke to coaches, seeing they're only training within their own environments. It just doesn't happen as much. So maybe there is something to learn from that. But I think they're also, I don't want to get too far away from this, but there are kind of various ways in which you can still get that challenge of like a mixed gender is by getting players to play up and play down and understanding that. Playing up an age group or playing across age groups. So there are elements of things you can do to kind of manipulate that, but I think that's probably another podcast. I think because I think you could probably have another podcast just on the relative age effect within soccer. That's certainly something we've seen on the girls' side of things in the US. We published a paper last year that looked at that, and especially in the club game, it's off the scale. Q1 and the changes that came into effect. I hate to say this, but it will just reverse. It will just like the changing from the calendar year to the is it August, September now? 2-3 years time, everyone will shift. That's what will happen. So yeah, it's probably another podcast for another day. But yeah, just want to get that across there.
Well, key word there for both of you guys, and we forget this, is play. And I mean that in the most childish sense of the word play. We see, at least in the United States, and that it's work. It's work for a lot of these kids, and it's a job. And they're going out to do a job, and the job is to make it onto a college soccer team. That's their job, and it becomes their full-time job. And I can't believe it. I had a discussion with a parent on social media the other day, and we were talking about, my comment was that, hey, parents, stop impersonating your children, writing emails to college coaches as your kid, pretending that it's your kid contacting them. And so you're doing all the work for your kid. At the same time, that coach isn't really communicating with your kid. They're communicating with you. And the mother said, yeah, but my child doesn't have enough time. They're so busy with school and they're so busy with soccer. They need my help and they need me to do it for them. Well, my first comment was, if your child can't multitask at this age and they're trying to go into college, good luck multitasking in college. You talk about a full-time job, you're 40 hours a week in doing schoolwork and you're 40 hours a week doing soccer, during in season. It's massive. It's difficult to multitask. So yeah, your child's going to fail. 100% they're going to fail in college if they can't figure out a way to do this. That was my first thought on that. And then honestly, um, these the kids have to take ownership for their own play, and what I mean by that is you have to enjoy what you're doing, right? You got to enjoy going to the wall. It's got to be fun. You got to enjoy juggling on your own. It's going to be fun. So the first form of play is, 1v0. Just I enjoy the ball. I enjoy this game so much that I want to play with it. I want to see what I can do. I want to try new tricks as I'm juggling. I want to, oh, I saw this one on YouTube. Let me try that. Let me get it down. And then the next form of play is, you and a buddy, you playing horse against the wall, or whatever version of that you want to play, or playing 1v1. And then, like we talked about, 2v2, 3v3. When I was in Argentina recruiting a few years back, there's a park in downtown Buenos Aires that's acres and acres and acres. It's a massive park. You go by at 7 in the morning, it's empty. But by 10, 11, 12 in the afternoon, you couldn't find an inch of grass on that, in that park to have a picnic to eat. They were turning over benches and using those as goals, or setting up shoes. And it's just part of the culture that it's play. This is their recreation. It's their play. And they love the heck out of the game. Yeah, go to Central Park in New York City and tell me how much acre space, or any city in America, and there's nobody playing. There's fields with empty goals, with sometimes with nets on them, in the middle of the country, and nobody's playing, unless it's practice, which is something I pay for. Therefore, I'm required to go to. Therefore, and because I'm required to go to it, it becomes a job, and it just kind of kills the joy for the game. And it just, yeah, it's the reason that we're playing is to go to college. That's the reason that we're playing. Got to make it to a college team. And my last thought on this is, it drives me crazy. Parents, please, if you're listening to this, do not even tease with your kids that someday they're going to pay you back with the college scholarship for all of the money that you've put into. I know you think it's funny. I know you think it's a joke, but there's something subconscious that sinks in there with kids. And don't even tease that this is an investment in their future. It should be if you're paying for something, it's because you all enjoy paying for it, right? It's like going to Disneyland, right? You enjoy vacationing at Disneyland, then pay for Disneyland, and you're going to drop $1,000. But you go, yeah, it's worth it because it was play, it was fun, we enjoy it. Approach your sports the same way. If you're paying for something, just because you enjoy it and just because you have fun, there's no expectations coming out of the back end of it. You've got a better chance, if you take it with that approach, of your kid not resenting the sport, not quitting the sport. Then I guess I lied. My last thought on that is that I do believe that there's a large, significant number of kids that are going into college soccer that would rather just quit after their high school year, but they can't find the courage to tell their parents that they're done. So they'll go in, they'll make the college team, and they end up transferring with these unreasonable expectations. And then they go, oh, well, nobody picked me up. Oh, well, I didn't get picked up out of the transfer portal. Oh, well, it's their way of telling mom and dad, I didn't want to play in the first place. I'll go, I'll do what you told me to do, what you expect of me. I'll play in college and then I'll quit. But I think all of that stems from going back to their childhood, the fact that it become a job for them instead of play. Long rant on that one.
I was No, I was going to act on about that because that's something in the literature in the scientific literature that we talk about is like early specialization. So like engaging in really high effort from like a really early age, really high effortful practice, early exposure to competition. And what it shows is like it leads to burnout, it leads to overuse injuries, and then when they drop out, they kind of fall out of love with the game. But that's more around the environment that they are in. We don't really talk about the parents. Do you think that's the setup of youth soccer in the US in general, or do you think it's the parents that are pushing that, as you said, that pay to play? You both touched on the pay to play element. that's probably important because I've, again, like anecdotally, I've heard how much pay to play is, and I'm on my best of salary. I sure couldn't afford it for one child, let alone two and nearly three. So, um, but is it? Do you think it's the just the setup, or the just kind of the structure of soccer in the US, or do you think it's more the parents thing saying, I'm paying this, so you'll go, right? You'll
What do
go
you
to all
think,
these
Baehr?
practices because I'm paying.
I think it's both. I mean, I think
Mm,
you can't really extract the two, because it's i- the costs have risen so much, especially in the call it the national leagues,
We're talking
because
upwards of 20 grand a year,
when
Matt, on the high end.
mm,
like if you're
It's
include
crazy.
yeah, when you're including fees, uniforms, travel, everything, it can easily, get that. I mean, we were in that situation, to be honest, with my daughter a couple years ago. It was, hey, we don't have an ECNL club within an hour of us. Okay, so uh,
mm,
we just have our RL club here in Bradenton, and we talked about, hey, do you want to go to the GA club maybe, because that's what a lot of our girls at our club would do to get that next level up. Um, and a couple of her teammates had done it, and we were worried, we might not even have a team because too many had left and people were dropping out, as happens in these older ages. But she goes, no, I don't want to spend an extra hour and a half in a car every day. Plus, oh, your league games this weekend are in Charleston, South Carolina. And it's
Right.
like, why? Like, there's plenty of
Right.
teams within 2 hours of us that we could play that are just as good a competition. And
Florida, you
so,
should not have to leave the state of Florida. Yeah.
right. And so the GA league is now I think they've changed it this year a little bit, but it's still, there's still tons of travel. But the beauty of RL right now for us is they even cut the state in half for the girls. So I don't even go north of I-4.
Wow.
So it's like we've found it, and it's for us, it's the best mix of quality competition plus restricted travel to keep those things down. And oh, by the way, you know, if your kid is if so I think it's twofold, and you can tell me if you see it differently, Don, but if your kid is good enough and puts in the effort on their end in recruiting at those second and third tier levels, you can still go play in college without too much trouble. Now, you may not go Power 4, you may not go to your dream school just because there's other factors in there, but I mean, if you want to play soccer in college in the United States, there is a place for you unless you can't walk and chew gum, right? Like, I mean, so like,
On the women's side, again, we're talking on the women's side.
yeah,
I
yeah,
will make
right. Yeah,
that
yeah,
caveat
sorry.
because the
No, that
competition on the men's side is so much
it,
thicker. There's so
it
much more.
true, but the difference being there are still there are still junior colleges and certain teams that'll always be begging for even boys.
Yes, the
Um,
worst college, junior college in Alaska, in the country. Yes, it's true. There's
I
always
mean, but
somewhere.
right, there's
You're
always a
right.
few, but
You're right.
most kids, if you're a Florida kid, you probably don't want to go play junior college in Kansas. It's just there's not
Right.
usually that desire. But
Right.
long story short, it can be done if you want to do it, but you got to choose what's best for you based on time, based on money, and all these factors. But yes, there are a ton of kids who just like I think are like what Don said. But we have got it's funny thing is we've got a girl on our team right now, senior year. She didn't play high school last year. She's not playing in college, but she's still signed up to play on an RL team because she loves the teammates, she loves the coach, and soccer's still fun. And that's
Right.
awesome. And we still have some of those. And now it gets harder and harder as you get into that junior senior year and kids start I'm not playing in college, so they just bail on club, but there are parents who go, "No, we've ridden it this far, you're going to keep going." And but to what end I don't know. Um but we've also got some girls I coached on the high school team that they're playing club in college, which is phenomenal. I
Right. Right.
my my first year of grad school, I played on the men's club team. Even though I'd played my 4 years Division III ball, you were allowed a couple players with NCAA experience. So I played club at Ohio U, and I loved it. It was so much fun. It was so awesome, and it didn't cost anything, and you were just kind of it was just, again, for the love of the game. And I tell people all the time, look, you want that for the girls who want that SEC school, big school football kind of thing, go play club soccer. You'll have a blast.
Go, yes. And the bigger ones have more than one club team, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I obviously, like I said, I'm not too familiar with the pace, but I'm familiar with it. But obviously, it's not something here. But I do think that there are, like, I've spoke to club, across various platforms, men's and women's, and obviously there is a price attached to it. But what they bring into the game is great. So they're utilizing that money that is, in terms of equipment, they're investing in their coaches and their club as well. So, I've had conversations with, and obviously I won't mention them, but I've had conversations with coaches, technical directors, and things like, and they don't say that they're getting X money or whatever, but just from what they say, you can tell that they're doing it for more. They're not doing it for they're doing it for the, like you just said there, Matt, like they're doing it for the love of the game themselves, and they're coaching for the love of the game themselves. And actually they're investing in themselves, they're investing in other coaches, and obviously, facilities, equipment, etc. So I do think one of the, I want to caveat, okay, yes, it does cost quite a substantial amount of money, but actually what you get out from that, take out the college, I know we're on a college podcast, but take out that, they're actually providing them with, and I'll be honest, they're providing with environments and level of coaches that only the professional teams here can provide. So I think it's
Right.
probably worth mentioning that, is that from a US side, okay, yes, it is a lot of money. I totally get that. But here, because we're volunteer and a lot of the clubs are volunteer, the level of access that you can get on that is low. So in a comparable, and I've seen plenty of clubs over there. I've been to college. It blows my mind the level, and I go in and out of professional clubs relatively often, and the college level is the equivalent. The staffing might be slightly lower, but like in terms of like facilities and equipment that like they have access to is on par. So to professional teams here. So just, I want to highlight that.
And more youth clubs are some of the facilities at some of these youth clubs. We've got a couple out here in California that I go to, and it's like, holy crud, look at these facilities. And some clubs are investing in weight rooms and film study rooms at the youth club level. So all of that costs money.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what I want to point out, is like, that's what professional teams or professional academies, the youth setups in professional teams have here. So that's that level that they get. So it's just kind of more of a comparison for some of your listeners in the US of, not that the equivalent club teams here don't have anything like that. Okay, it's volunteering, it's free, but the level of access is very, very different. So they are providing a good level of coaching and so like everything else that goes with those pay to pay models.
Right, right. So yeah, so one of the takeaways I want people to get, and then I'll let you guys come back with anything else that really stood out of your studies. So for the parents and players listening to this, I will tell you, if you really, really want to play in college and you want a good school for your kid, one of the areas, look outside your region. Look outside into areas of the country that aren't in your geographical region, because the college coaches don't know about you. A lot of our clients at SRUSA, we end up introducing them to schools that they've never heard of and that they end up falling in love with. And it's like, wow, I didn't even know this existed. And so it increases your chances dramatically of continuing on and having a variety of schools that are interested in you. So you have a list of schools that are truly interested in you to contrast and compare against and find a better fit by looking, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 states away into another geographical region. So that's, again, the coaches don't know about you. They know about the kids inside their region, but when they see somebody outside their region, there's just something always intriguing about that to a college coach. Oh, a kid from, Florida wants to come to Colorado. Oh, wow, I haven't seen this kid. And there's something interesting about that. So just kind of a takeaway for parents and stuff. So, Matt, I'll start with you and let you wind up. Is there anything else about your study that you think that parents and players, not just around the world, but certainly around the world, but in the United States should know about that really jumped out to you?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of really summarize, I mean, across the board, whether it be the men's, the women's programs, D1, D2, the two things that coaches were really looking for was coachability, from like a psychological point of view, so coachability. And then if it was one skill or attribute, it was decision making. So game intelligence overall, but decision making was key, which is kind of is obvious really. They were valued the most important traits. And yeah, I mean, really, from me, the last thing I'd say is, look, this is me dipping my toe in the water into this area. So my background is talent ID and development in soccer, and I'm in the UK. So, but I'm trying to get more kind of into the US, and to understand it is just to kind of say, to reach out and to college coaches, programs, even the platforms like ECNL, MLS Next, G8, whoever it might be. I'm always open via Twitter, LinkedIn, my email, because ultimately, as I said, there's been very little research in this area in the US, despite the kind of exponential growth in participation and professionalization of the game over there. But yes, it's calling really. This is what our study does right at the very end. And what I'd like to do is just call for more kind of evidence informed approaches to talent ID, scouting, recruitment. And what that will do is hopefully it will complement the perceptions of the coaches within our study. Hopefully, and it'll also like reduce the bias and improve fairness in scouting and recruitment. So yeah, I'd just love to hear from people and get their thoughts, and I'm happy to work with them. That's kind of the way I see things, is almost like come to me with ideas for what we can do for research.
Right, right.
Because we've got ideas, but is that the priority of for you guys over in the US, but also for how are they going to use that information? And my study, I don't want it to sit on a repository in a science
Right.
journal.
You'd like it used, right?
Absolutely. So hence why I put it out on things like Twitter, and I made the infographics to make them digestible, because if you do download the paper, it's a huge table, right? So they're the kind of key takeaways that are on what I posted, which ultimately led to this. And as I said, just to reach out, any coaches, anyone wants to speak to me and kind of come to ideas and wants to work with me, I'm open to it, because I want to involve this research and make sure that it reaches you guys. So yeah, that's the kind of last thing for me, really.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure that all of your contact information is in the podcast description so people will know how to get a hold of you on all of our platforms. So what about you, Baehr? What haven't we touched on that you had in your study that you'd like to? Is there another takeaway or key takeaway that you'd like parents and kids to know about?
Um, I don't know if there's anything that we really haven't touched on that jumps
We've
out.
covered a
I
lot.
mean,
Yeah.
we have. I think the biggest thing, to be honest, is what you said almost there at the very end, that, and it's why I started the podcast, right? There's a lot of schools out there that you don't know about, that you haven't heard about, that are worth researching. And the amount of time that you spend thinking about all of the things that you're looking for in a college experience that aren't soccer related is very important.
Very
And
important, right?
and if obviously on discovercollegesoccer.com, we've got all of our interviews there, but there's a resources page that my survey results are on, that you can just download the PDF right there. There's maps of where all the college soccer programs are in the country. You can see it on a Google map. And if on our main page, if you hover over resources, um,
Right, right.
I did create a thing called Find Your Right Fit, and it is a way for you to just sift through programs based on things like size, location, price, major, all that kind of stuff that can help you narrow that list down to, and maybe you'll see the list and go, oh, I didn't even think about that school, or I don't know who that school is, so let me go research them, or let me see if maybe Matt's interviewed him on a podcast. So, um, just take your time and think about all that stuff that's not soccer related, because to be honest, that's gonna make you happier usually in your college experience, all those things rather than just the soccer part.
Oh, no doubt. I always describe it to kids and families as a series of tick boxes. And those tick boxes, by the way, are weighted differently for every person. I talk to kids and parents where they say, this is all about academics. That's what this is all about. And this is about getting my degree. And the soccer is, yes, important, but this is all about academics. And then got other people like my son was, frankly, and pretty much what I was. This is all about soccer. Yes, I know I get it. I got to get a degree. I get it. I'll get a degree. I will. But this is about soccer. And so they're not weighted the same for everybody. And, some kids have to stay within 50 miles of home. They would break down and fall apart if they were more than 50 miles away from home. Then other kids cannot wait to go to the other side of the country. That's like a 10 out of 10 for them. They need to, not because they don't love their parents, but they just have that adventurous spirit in them, and have to leave. And you've got all of these different things, from academics to facilities to locations to culture, team culture, the coaches, the teachers, the campus culture. Some kids absolutely must be at a Penn State football game experiencing the whiteout. You know that big football environment, or they want to be in the VCU when they, or VT rather, when they play Enter Sandman. That's what they've dreamed about their whole life, and that's what's most important to them. And I always say that's okay. Whatever's most important to you is okay. Don't let somebody talk you out of what's important to you, but understand that you are probably going to have to sacrifice things to get the majority of your tick boxes checked off, and there may be sacrifice in some of those things, and there's going to be some give and take, and some of those things are going to be more expensive than other things. And if money is number one to you, getting everything paid for, then there's going to be sacrifices on the other end. So whatever it is that's important to you, it's okay, but you can't be rigid and uncompromising if you're going to get those things ticked off. That's all. There's going to have to be some give and take. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you coming on. We went at it for, geez, coming up on 2 hours now. There's a lot of good information you guys have given out of this. And as you guys end up producing other studies or have anything else that you want to talk about, you're both more than welcome to come back on Inside College Soccer, and we can talk about it. And so, Matt, Andrew, best place to get a hold of you is what?
I would say email. So my email is Matthew with two T's .Andrew at mmu.ac.uk. So MMU stands for Manchester Metropolitan University. Or I'd say Twitter, which is my username is Matthew Andrew 23. So yeah, they're probably the best two.
All right. And Baehr?
Discovercollegesoccer.com, and from there you can get all the socials, which it's discover_CS on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everything. So,
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us, guys. And we'll talk to you soon.
thanks, Don.
Thanks, Tom.